introduction of who's here with us today. You've got 10 students that are in the meeting here with you. They are, and just to kind of set the stage, they are in a class that's running through the end of July and possibly into a little bit of August. And they are in their third week. And there's, again, 10 students, and then Kathy, our program manager, is also on the call. Nick, our instructor, is not with us right now. He's actually off doing some other things on Fridays. I kind of jump in and do more the EQ stuff and helping them understand LinkedIn and career opportunities and stuff like that. And then the rest of the week, they're doing development. They've so far done a little bit of, they're doing JavaScript, and they're doing arrays and doing some functions and things like that. So they haven't, they're only 3 weeks in, but they have learned a lot in 3 weeks. And our whole environment for teaching obviously is inside of Teams here. Everything is recorded, as you can see. And so we're excited to have you as our first guest speaker. And with that, I'm just going to kind of hand it off to you and let you introduce yourself. And I've already we've dug into your LinkedIn profile because we're learning LinkedIn today. So we know a little bit about you. They probably have lots of questions. I've talked about SharePoint and your background with that and the opportunities for that in the field. And with that, I'm going to pass to you for the next hour. Okay?
Great. Thank you, Laura. And nice to meet everyone. And I hope to catch your names as we go through. But I'm Pat Esposito. And I am with Microsoft. I am a modern workplace specialist. I help our customers with Office 365, with what we call enterprise mobility and security, all of our security products, and Windows 10. Kind of the collaboration stack, the productivity stack. And my background has been for many years. I'm only at Microsoft for a couple of years, but I've been in the ecosystem for many decades. I like to joke that I should have taken the job offer that Microsoft gave me in 1985. So it's been a long, long time in the space. And back then I was a developer writing a lot of code, like some of you are learning today. And over the years, I worked on different platforms. And one thing that always kept me in the Microsoft family and kept me excited about what we're doing here, even today, is that even from the early days, we provided tools so innovative people like yourselves can build solutions. And we're still doing that at a macro level. In the early 80s, it was an operating system and a C compiler, one language, always supported, long before the internet was invented. Today, we have hundreds of services and APIs and different development tools that help us bring really, really innovative solutions and build, wonderful capabilities and tools and products for our internal consumption at our corporations, for the consumer, and having, you guys to become part of this ecosystem and part of that experience and driving it forward for hopefully the next 3 or 4 decades is really exciting. So I'm really happy to be here. I think to learn from you as much as sharing some of my background. I think when we look at where Microsoft is today, and before I go any further, I'd love to make this interactive. So I'm here to answer questions. There's no question that's out of scope, and feel free to interrupt. And there's a bunch of us. If we want, we can try the new Raise Your Hand Teams feature. It's kind of cool. I'm just starting to get used to that myself. But please, let's make this interactive. I think it's really exciting where Microsoft is in the marketplace today and what we've done over the, again, decades. It was not an overnight success. We took a lot of work to get here, but we're really in a very interesting place where we have leadership in the platforms, whether it's something like Teams or other parts of the modern workplace like SharePoint, and frankly, even in older collaborative platforms like Exchange, email, but also what we're doing in Azure, and more importantly, the innovation that we have in the dev tools. So Lori said that you guys are working on JavaScript. If anyone could answer, what development tool are you using to write your JavaScript in?
Hi, Pat. My name's Kaya, and we're using Visual Studio Code, I believe.
Outstanding, outstanding.
I just have a question for you. When you first started developing and coding, what was like one thing that was like really stressful for you, or that you had to kind of get over to make yourself better?
So it was a really long time ago, Kaya. And so let me give you a history lesson that might seem hard to believe in this day and age. When I started coding, it was before the invention of the IBM PC, that which spawned Microsoft to life. And I started as an electrical engineer. And back in the day, we were writing firmware, basically ones and zeros, to drive the hardware where our firmware was embedded. Now, firmware is still a big part of the devices we use. We often update our firmware, we flash a BIOS and whatnot. But when I was writing that, the most stressful part is that we didn't have the dev tools. I literally would write assembly language on a piece of paper and hand compile what the mnemonics were in terms of octal code, and then punch it in code by code into an EEPROM burner that was nothing but a keypad and a little device. The tools sucked. It was painful. And if I made a mistake when I was transforming the mnemonic into an octal code by hand, I did all that work and no way to troubleshoot it. And I'd plug it in, I'd turn on my hardware, and I happened to work for a printer company at the time. Very often paper would be spewing all over the floor because I had a bug in my code and no way to debug it. My world became very, very different when, at the time, Tektronix invented a in-circuit emulator, a development platform, and it was really expensive. Probably the version that I got, which was the bottom of the line, was probably $150,000 worth of equipment. But when my manager gave that to me and said, hey, you can now debug your code, my life changed. And interestingly enough, when I started seeing the value of this, and then something called a C compiler was invented, I moved from being an electronics engineer to a software engineer. And I literally, after about 2 years of doing the electronics and the software, the firmware, I moved to purely software, and the rest is history. I think I was at a transition point in the industry where we began to see the value of software, and it was really outrunning what we were able to do with hardware. And I think we're on the tail end of a phenomenal growth curve that's been, exponential year over year, decade over decade, where we're doing more with software, right? And we don't have this. So to answer your question, God, it was painful. And the last thing I said about where Microsoft is today is we've got great dev tools. And that's why we asked about the dev tool and Visual Studio Code, because this is a breakthrough that if you didn't have that, you'd be working in Notepad++, or you'd be writing code in a text editor with no way to debug, no way to trace, no way to post your code in and out of Git. Are you guys using GitHub to manage your projects?
We started using
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Great skill to develop. Make sure you're comfortable with your commits and your pull requests, because it doesn't matter what language or what tool you use. That's pretty much de facto for version control and branch management inside of our development environments. So these are really great fundamental capabilities that didn't exist in the beginning and have evolved. And one of the things that I can say is there was a point in time, it wasn't that long ago, on some of our platforms. Lori mentioned SharePoint. I started with SharePoint in 2000 and ran a company, wrote some books, was on the speaker trail, did all the community stuff. And it's still an important platform to me, and I just love it because of what we can do to really just make it sing and dance. But there was a period of time where the platform outweighed the development tool. There was it was almost impossible to custom code anything in 2001, 2003, 2007 version of SharePoint. But around 2010, the development environment, the tools that were available to the developer in SharePoint really began to come up to par and maybe just a little bit ahead of where the platform was. And if we were to correlate that back to SharePoint growth and adoption across the planet, we'll see that right about the time the dev tools got to where they were solid and just ahead of the platform, meaning we can do everything we needed to do, and a little bit more with the dev tools, that's when SharePoint adoption started growing exponentially and has continued since. And I think it really illustrates the importance of the developer mindset, the developer tools, that when the tools are there to get the job done, put in the hand of innovators like yourselves, that's where really great things begin to happen, whether it's adoption, just really cool applications, or the ability to make things happen. And it's an important note, because along your journey, you'll be asked to develop and support a variety of platforms. A couple years from now, maybe some of you won't be a programmer. You'll go into a management role, an analyst role, a different type of role. I'm going to encourage you to never give up that programming knowledge and that base skill that you develop, because when you could understand any system from a software standpoint at a very basic level, when you understand how others might be doing customizations on that system, you really know that system from the inside out. The skills that you're going to develop when you're troubleshooting your code, even if you never write code again, are going to help you in the long run when you're managers and helping others to be successful, because you'll be able to still debug their code. In fact, it's a game I play with some developers from time to time. I'll be very honest. If I write the code, I will make every syntax error known to mankind, because I'm just not doing it every day. But I bet I can still debug a piece of code faster than anybody else. And I see, and I don't know the name, oh, Solomon West has a question. Hi, Solomon.
Hi, Mr. Esposito.
Wait a minute, got to stop you there. My name's Pat. Mr. Esposito is my dad. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Hey, Pat. It's good to speak with you today. I wanted to ask you about some of the technologies that Microsoft offers right now, and but to start off, I wanted to ask you about like debugging. Do you suggest that we go through things that we're interested in on GitHub and try to understand the code no matter the language? Do you think that will help us in our learning curve?
Always, and I think when it really goes right into the last comment I was making. When you understand an environment at the object level, right? When you understand that where the object is, or even if all you are is a debugger, I know I can. For example, my favorite tool right now, because I don't write a lot of code. I'm actually in a sales role at this point in my career, but I still work with PowerShell all the time just to learn how things work. I'll connect to a service or an API, and I'll pull data back, because when you're able to debug, when you're able to look at a system under the covers, so to speak, or deep in the bowels, being able to pull the data back, it doesn't lie to you. What you see on a screen, or see in a report, or see on a dashboard may have been transformed, data may have been processed, but when you get to the raw information, and an example might be, how is Teams configured? Is this team configured for external sharing? Yes or no? You could try to get access to the Teams console. Not sure if Lori's going to give you that access. There may not be someone around who can answer the question, but if you can connect to your team using PowerShell in one commandlet, you can pull back and see what that configuration is. And if there's a 1 or a true next to external SharePoint sharing enabled, you'll absolutely know. And you could always get right to the factual, absolute correct answer without any logistics noise and people involved. And so debugging might be more important of a skill to keep through your entire career than actually coding. My personal opinion, it's really, really served me well.
Okay, and so for my the further question, I wanted to ask you about Azure for students and the tools that are available. I did a little bit of research, but I wasn't exactly sure if Nebula Academy, if under the license that we use, if we are able to those tools, or just the credit.
I probably have to speak to Lori more specifically, but I will say this. Anybody can apply, and Lori, I'm not sure if this is something that you're using. You may have some other tools, but anybody as an individual can sign up for the Microsoft Office Developer Program. and you would be provided with access to Visual Studio Code, which you could get anyway. You would get access to, I believe, an Office 365 tenant, and to answer your question specifically, 150 minutes per month of Azure credit. I believe the Office Developer Program provides that much. It may be more, maybe less, but I believe.
Yeah, so Pat, we will be having them do that. We just haven't, not quite there yet.
Yep, we're starting at the basics. So
Yep.
to answer your question is, once you have Azure credit available to you through whatever mechanism, you will be able to use those to spin up a service. And even though it sounds like, geez, $150, what can I do? You'd be surprised how many different services you could spin up for a very small amount of credit, because you're doing it in dev environment. It's a very low transaction count. You're not pushing up all that much data. Unless you start doing some AI and machine learning with very large models, it goes a very long way and really, really helps with the education. And it's also helping you learn how to navigate the Azure portal and spin up some of the services.
Thank you.
Yep, I think Kaya has a question again.
Oh, this is Deborah this time.
Hi. Oh, there you are, Deborah.
Good. I mean, my question is, when you're looking back on your career and at where you are at right now, and what can you tell us, like, about what should we expect from the technology world? What is like, what should we expect in like, what are the highs and the low in this world? Because I mean, for my part, technology like computer stuff, it's all brand new to me, because before I was like a nurse and everything just changed. So I studied this program. So what can you tell us, like, how this world gonna be for us?
It's a great question. So first, thank you for being a nurse. My wife is a nurse. Both my sisters are a nurse. My daughter's
You're
an
welcome.
occupational therapist. And I think that you will be uniquely positioned to do some amazing things with your nursing background and your technology background that you're gaining. When we look at things like nurse informatics, I can't help, I keep trying to push my wife, who's not really interested in the technology side, but nurse informatics, being able to analyze large data sets and do predictive analysis that helps in healthcare and care plans, is technology that's available today, but so many in the healthcare community, particularly the nursing community, just lack the skills to be able to wrap their arms around it. So
Okay.
I think there's amazing synergies between things that we experience in life, other industries, and technology. I think where it's different today than where it might have been when I started, for sure, and over the last number of decades, is if you wanted to work with technology in the 70s or 80s, you had to be a technologist. Today, everybody uses technology, whether it's your phone, whether it's your Roku device, you had to get it on the web first, right? Or whether
Yes.
it's a more sophisticated system, everybody's using technology. And so as a result, there was a period of time, I would say probably a decade ago, where there was a little bit less interest. I think some of the STEM and STEAM programs were really introduced to try to get more people, more young kids, to really try, young adults, to really try to, focus in on technology, because we were losing a little bit of the interest to be a technologist, because everybody works with technology. But I really think the future is going to be amazing because of the advances that we've had in technology, the ability to do things at mega scale where we couldn't do them before. I talked about my starting career. I was writing firmware and working on a 4-bit microprocessor. Today you have the cloud, which represents unlimited capacity and unlimited horsepower. I don't know what I would have done with that 30 years, 40 years ago, but it would have been amazing. And
Yes.
so you're starting at that point. I can't, and I wish I had a crystal ball, because all I know is the future is going to be even more amazing, because innovation continues to grow at an exponential rate. The tools are there to do the jobs, the services are there, And it just really needs you guys to be creative, to get your basic skills, because you'll use them for your entire career. In fact, sometimes I joke and say, I only learned 12 things in my entire career, but I combine them in so many unique ways that I can do anything. And a lot of that is really true, right? Again, you may or may not be a programmer later in your career, but never give up that knowledge and that skill.
Yes. Thank you so much, Pat.
Welcome. Great question. Kaya?
I just wanted to know what's the difference between debugging and coding?
I want to find a smart answer for that. There's not a lot of difference. You're looking at it from different perspectives. Coding is the creative writing part, right? And debugging is looking at it to make sure it's executing correctly. So they're really part of the same process.
Right.
And I'm glad you asked the question in this context. I'm going to share a kind of a sidebar story, but I learned it a long, long time ago, and I introduced it into my technical skills. It's one of those 12 things that I learned about. When I was really young, I had my first home. I had an electrician do some work, and I was observing what he was doing as he was changing switches and outlets. And I had opened up the walls. I was pretty enterprising and trying to learn this stuff. And I noticed he did something no one else ever did. Every time he got done with a switch or an outlet, he wrapped a piece of black tape around it. I said, why are you doing that? I have all these outlets that I've looked at in my house. There's no black tape. We call it the courtesy wrap. Courtesy wrap? What's a courtesy wrap? You never know if the next electrician is going to stick his hands in on that switch to work on it without turning off the circuit breaker and get shocked. So as a courtesy to the people who are going to come behind me, I put a wrap of tape on it so they can't get electrocuted. And I thought about that, and I started applying that to my coding technique. When you're writing code, we very often want to get creative. Like, how could I do the most amount of code in the least amount of characters, using all sorts of embedded capability rather than discrete components? But when we get really, really clever and write these, whole functions in one line of code, they're incredibly hard to debug. They're also very difficult for the person behind you who comes to support your code in the future to try to understand what the heck were you thinking. And on top of that, if you are going to be creative, and that's okay, be sure you write more comments than lines of code. And it's all about making what you're doing sustainable, right? So think about it from a debug standpoint. If I can write the lines of comments that say, I'm adding these three numbers together and expect to get this kind of outcome, that means when I go and debug it, I have my instruction set right there in my code that says this is what I'm expecting as an outcome. And so I guess to answer the question, and I've kind of really expanded on it here, but writing is the coding part. That includes the design, the literal syntax that you're typing in, and the comments. And debugging is making sure that it's working the way it was intended. Kathy.
Hi, Pat. I'm the program manager, but I have a question. Before you came on, we were talking, Lori was talking a little bit about SharePoint, and she said you are expert in that area. And one of our participants has a background in human resources. And so maybe it would be helpful to talk a little bit about how maybe she could utilize those human resource skills with also maybe learning the SharePoint and the technical skills she's learning in this program. How would she pull those together to make herself marketable?
Okay, that's a great question. I think when we think about a platform like SharePoint, and really look at where it fits in the overall strategy, and we're on Teams, you guys are using Teams, we can see that Teams has become really the center. It's the hub for teamwork. It's really become the center of collaboration. Now, we also know that SharePoint is under the covers supporting file sharing and some of the other capabilities that you're experiencing through Teams. When we look at SharePoint on its own, while it can also be a platform for collaboration, Teams has kind of eclipsed some of the user experiences, it's also very much a communication platform. And I think when we start thinking about it from a human resource standpoint, it might be about, how do I communicate information out? How do I organize my content and think about my taxonomies, my structures of how I'm going to structure my information? How do I make information findable and consumable so people spend more time using the knowledge rather than searching for it? And this is an area where I could be honest with you, in my experience with SharePoint over almost 20 years, that when we take a pure developer who doesn't think about it from the user experience, from the subject matter, so I'm a human resource person trying to identify information. I'll give you an example in a second. When we start looking at it from there, and I just do it from a technical perspective, it's invariably going to create a user experience that's just not optimized for the human who's trying to consume it. So I think thinking about what you're doing and how you're sharing information and how you're using the tool, and when I say communication, the communication site is probably your #1 tool to start learning about, which is just, how do I post content, but be able to present it in different ways. Like, hey, here's where you look for information about payroll, but if you're in the US, you want to look here. And if you're in the UK, you want to look there because the labor laws and payroll rules are different. It's really understanding your audience and then use the information and use the features in the tool. And I don't want to start rattling them off, but things like audience targeting and filtering and metadata to be able to literally, slice, dice, pivot, and sort things in different ways so it's most relevant to the person who's trying to consume it.
So almost any career that any of the participants are exploring, this SharePoint could be helpful in their organization of how they're looking at their whatever area they decide to go into.
Kathy, I was trying so hard not to be a SharePoint bigot, but yeah, SharePoint is a hammer and the world is a nail. Everybody should learn SharePoint, from the youngest to the oldest. It should be part of our standard. In fact, I've advocated that it becomes one of the major food groups. It's such a universal tool. It really, really is a platform that we could use to solve almost every problem. And now combined with Teams, I think we've got Teams and the Power Platform. I think we have a toolbox that we can build solutions, and this might disturb some of you, without writing a line of code. And I'm going to also challenge you, as you're learning how to code, do that. But also learn where you can use tools that don't require code, because coding takes time, it takes skill, it takes ongoing support and maintenance, and it costs more. When you can build a solution that solves a problem without using these tools, and it's robust and it's of good quality, it means you're getting something to market a lot faster. You're solving a business problem a lot faster. And so as a good developer, or I should say as a solution expert, being able to know which tools to choose and move fluidly between them is really what I hope you'll all get to in your career. Even if you start as a developer, you're learning JavaScript today, I assure you that before you're 10 years into your career, you'll know 10, 15 different languages. It comes with the territory. There's no reason you have to stop at languages, right? Also learn different tools so you apply the right tool to the job that gets it done the most effective way.
Thank you, Pat. That was great.
Cool. Let's see. We've got RV. Who's RV? Let me hover over. And
it's me, Ronald.
Ronald.
It's nice to meet you, Pat. So my question is, if you were to learn to code from zero, what steps would you take? What resources would you take?
I would definitely join the Nebula Academy and talk to Lori. And I don't mean that so facetiously. You know,
Thanks,
my
Pat.
skills are getting a little rust. There may be a couple of programs I am going to join as a student so I can get some of my skills back to where they once were. And I mean that seriously. I think you want to, these are great examples, and this is a great program to be able to do this kind of thing, because I think for me, and I hope you're starting to feel the same, I think doing this in a team environment is a little better than doing it on your own. You're bouncing ideas, you're sharing lines of code. Hey, I wrote that code this way, you wrote it that way. What's the difference? And when you start getting super crazy using your debug skills, and I mean really getting into it, you'll learn that one line executes a little faster than the other. Okay. It's a good tip to have. It's a good trick for me to know, because sometimes I'm going to write a piece of code where execution time is paramount. I'll write it differently. All right. So I think working in the team environment is really valuable, whether it's online or in person. I think, you know, definitely understanding where you have your passions. Like, you know, there are Java developers and there's JavaScript developers and there's C# developers. Somewhere along your trajectory, you'll find the languages and the platforms and the tool sets that you like most. Some people build web apps, some people build mobile apps. And there's enough specialty between them. If you want to really master them, you kind of stay focused. But that will happen naturally. I think early in your career, just be a sponge. Try to learn as much about software development as possible wherever you can pick it up. You know, subscribe to MSDN magazine. It's online now, no more print. You know, but read the books, read the manuals, learn, practice, learn a little new language. I once learned the language just because I thought it had a really cool name. It's called Forth. Wasn't very useful, but I learned it because I just liked the name. And I learned that it did some really cool things that I couldn't do in another language. And so these give you experiences, they give you technique and skills. And so you just, when it comes to software, experiment. Typically, you're not going to hurt anybody or hurt anything. So write a piece of code, hit an endpoint, try to consume data, challenge yourself to, you know, do something more efficiently or with a better user experience, you know, whatever turns you on. If you're a front end guy versus a back end guy or gal, you know, work on those things that, you know, help you just learn new technique. And don't overlook the old school stuff. Everything you're doing today with modern languages and API are all built on top of foundations that were invented even before I got into the industry, if you could believe that, right? A lot of what you're doing is stuff that was fundamental technique 60 years ago, 70 years ago, in fact. And it's just evolved to a better level, a faster level, a newer level. But fundamentally, a lot hasn't changed. It's still being able to tell the machine through an instruction set to take an action that you want it to take. Solomon.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you are because you were in sales at this point in your career. Um, so I wanted to know. I was reading an article earlier this week about, you know, high availability and how important that is, and why that's like a reason for a lot of people going with cloud technology and choosing Azure as a IaaS infrastructure type of thing. So I wanted to know, because we're so early in the program, and I think it's been about 3 weeks now that we've been in the program, or maybe 4. I wanted to know, what is the role of like abstraction in the services that you sell, so that high availability is like what makes it different from AWS on the abstraction side?
Let me address that from maybe a couple of different perspectives. I think we're all experiencing what I do for a living, the modern workplace. And the modern workplace is being able to get the job done wherever you are, whatever obstacles are in front of you, by being in a connected experience. Like, that's all it really is. And the whole world right now is experiencing the modern workplace while we're forced to shelter in and work remote. And so I think what we've seen and what we're experiencing, certainly at Microsoft and AWS and GCP, we're seeing customers recognize, and some taking an action right now. It's kind of a little bit late. They should have been in position before the pandemic, but they're trying that realize that when it comes to reliability, when it comes to scalability, I just can't provide that same level of quality in the data center. And if the pandemic has taught us nothing else, it's really cemented that lesson, because they never invented their VPN inbound circuit to handle the entire company at one time. It was always like, 10, 20% of our people might be remote at any given time. We can handle it. COVID came, everyone worked from home, circuits are failing. When they looked at their systems on front end, whether it's firewalls and proxies and all the network gear that you have to route through, never expected to have such a high volume of traffic. Same with the back end systems. And so what's happening is that, the world is realizing that the cloud does two things. I kind of joke, because it's kind of a little twist, but I say the cloud is hanging over all of us. But I mean that in a very positive way, right? The cloud is just there. Wherever I go, the cloud is with me. It's my shadow over my back. It's going to be there. And it's going to give me a direct experience. It's going to give me an always connected experience. It's going to get me to, whether I'm consuming a Word document, a SharePoint site, or a application sitting on back-end Azure services, I'm going to be able to get to it in a way that is much more reliable, always connected, and frankly, provides the owners of that environment, particularly when it's an IaaS or a PaaS type environment, to be able to provide, at a turn of a switch, the kind of capacity and reliability that they need to satisfy whoever their consumers are, right? So we've seen that in Azure, where customers had some systems that were not in Azure that they moved very quickly into Azure, so they're able to get elastic scale, something you can't do if you buy a piece of hardware. If I buy a server in a data center, that's what I have for capacity. If I need more, I buy another one. And if I need less, I'm stuck with two. I can't send one back to the store. When I'm in Azure, and our competitors as well, I have elasticity that allows me to throttle up and throttle down based on volume. Now I can do that at a capacity level. Think about being able to just add more CPU cycles, more storage, more capacity. But to tie it back to why we're all here as a group, I could do that at a code level too. And that is some really, really sophisticated code. I've read it and read about it. I've never actually coded in that environment, but you can actually build applications that will auto provision more capacity based on queuing theory. So if I have a queue that says at any given time I can handle 10 units, when I see a trend that's pushing me either to the 10 at a certain frequency, I want to spin up another queue on another set of capacity, maybe in a different part of the world, and balance my load. Now we're starting to get into very, very sophisticated programming, but these are the kinds of development thoughts and patterns, I should say, that we're following at Microsoft when we bring a new system or service. Our competitors are doing the same. These are built with cloud scale in mind, and it happens at the coding level. So even though there's an engineer who's provisioning servers, we still have servers in our data center, of course. However, the way the software interacts with them is now in a very dynamic fashion. So I'm not sure if I answered all your questions. So when you talk about abstraction, it really is still a layers of abstraction conversation, but it's happening at an uber scale and probably a lot more layers of abstraction than we would have had, even a decade ago.
Thank you.
Welcome. I don't see any more questions. Here you go. Hey, George.
How you doing, Pat? I just wanted to know, so what does a senior specialist do, and what does a typical workday consist of for you?
So I do as little as possible for as much money as they'll pay me. You can laugh. You can laugh. That was a joke.
Under that.
There you go. So I'm a little bit different than some of my peers. I definitely am in a selling role. My job is to help customers make purchase decisions around about 64 different products that make up the modern workplace. Everything from SharePoint to Teams, the voice components in Teams. It's really to help customers with that. And I'm new to sales. I've been, in sales. I wanted to challenge myself as a engineer turned developer, turned consultant, turned developer again. I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could sell. Could I use all of the skills I've learned and earned in my career, and could I use that in a totally different way to help my customers? And so I joined Microsoft in this selling role, and my approach is really very different. I try to help customers by understanding their business need, but then trying to really, truly do solutioning for them. Well, you can get to your outcome this way or that way. Here are some options. Here's the approach that you might need to execute on those options. And here's the various technology stacks. And to kind of tie it back to conversations we touched on before, might be able to solve a problem through a low-code solution using the Power Platform, Power Apps, and Power Automate. Might be able to solve the problem by building a mobile application, which first you've got to get a developer and a little bit of time. Might be able to solve it with an out-of-the-box. And so it's trying to align the customer's objective, not I need to do this, but more importantly, okay, you need to do it. How soon do you need to do it? How often do you need to do it? How many people will be doing it? To truly do more of a system design around it, as small as it might be, right? And really bring them the right solution or the right combination of services and products to get that solution. So for me, I'm using every skill that I learned. The same skills you're learning right now, I'm using them every day. I'm not writing code, but I'm thinking about how would I architect this system for them? How do I build something that's reliable so they can do it once and do it right, and it's going to still be here? I'll share this with you. One of the proudest moments that you will all have, and I've had it a few times in my life, is when you develop a piece of software or build a system, it goes into production, and many, many years later, you find out it's still being used today. I did a system for Prudential. It was crude, it was crappy, but it was very effective. Saved them $17 million, clawed back another $8 million from vendors. That was in 1994. About a year ago, I heard from my then divisional vice president who I worked for. Well, he wasn't a DVP then, but he was now. He said, I just want to let you know that system you built for us in 1994 is still in use today. We've upgraded it a couple times. It's like the third different platform. I think it's all running on Oracle now, but the same exact logic, the same system, the same human interactions, and to a large degree, the same front-end screens are still in use today. To me, that was, I could have retired right then there and said, I was successful. I did something that was sustainable, that made a difference for somebody, and that was still in use. It wasn't a flash in the pan. It wasn't a trend. And you will all have that same experience somewhere in your life. And I know when that happens, I hope you remember this conversation, say, that guy Pat said, I would have one of these super proud moments. Might only happen once, might happen a lot. Hope it happens a lot. But you'll have it. It's going to be a great moment for you guys. You're going to love when that happens. Just say, I did that. And I'm looking at Deborah. I hope it's something in healthcare, because healthcare needs a lot of help, especially now.
Yes, absolutely.
So with that being said, Pat, right? One more thing. Some of us, obviously this is a boot camp program, so it's moving along fairly quick. So some of us, we might find ourselves getting frustrated or even discouraged. What words, what advice or words of encouragement would you give us to, just keep the faith and keep pushing forward? Like, what advice would you give?
So I once earned a certificate at one of my companies. We were giving out these awards, and everyone got these glowing awards, and I got this wonderful award given to me, and it was the most curses per line of code. And, you know, I didn't know how to take that. Obviously, they were making fun of me. But yeah, I have a tendency when I'm coding to have a very vile experience with the screen. I will yell at it. I will scream at it. I will call it very vulgar things. And that worked for me. It helps me get through my frustration. But I have to be honest with you, there's nothing that excites me more than getting a new line of code, even hello world, to work on a new language or a new platform or a new technique. I haven't done a lot of mobile development, but I remember not too long ago, I just built a really cruddy mobile app that just put hello world on the mobile app. And when I saw that work, nothing was more exciting. So I think what I'm saying is find a coping mechanism, whatever works for you. Everybody's got something different. But find out that little thing that really makes you want to come back again and do it again, right? For me, it's getting something trivial to work for the first time. New language, a new platform. It's so exciting that it just keeps bringing me back to saying, yeah, I really want to be a programmer. And I'll share this with you. As much as I'm in sales right now, my objective is to get back into technology. I probably won't be a coder, but I want to work around programmers, around engineering, and around development. And that's my goal. My personal objective here at Microsoft is to switch camps out of sales and back into engineering. And so it's because those little things that I found that really, really turned me on continue to do that. And everyone will find it somewhere, you know, in what really excites you. Go back to it, repeat it, get motivated again. And then that and like Yoo-hoo and Twinkies and whatever kind of sugar you need to keep motivated for, you know, marathon coding sessions around the clock. They can be fun too.
Okay. Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that.
And you know what? The other thing I want to encourage everybody here is find a mentor. In fact, I would encourage you all to connect with me on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat online a little bit or even pick up a phone. But, you know, find yourself a mentor and you know, work with them. It doesn't have to be necessarily another programmer. You'll work with plenty of those, right? And plenty of techie folks. But find someone who can really help you, you know, figure out the path for you, because it's just, there's so many pathways we can take, so many different end games. You don't know what the end is going to look like. You just know what's ahead of you and the next couple of steps. And so, you know, I would definitely encourage you to find a mentor who can help you through some of the good times and the bad, to build on the good. And when you're in trouble, help you find those things that are important to you, bring them back around, shine them up, and get you motivated again.
Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
All right.
So
Any more questions for Pat before we wrap up?
So thanks, everybody. And Lori, thank you so much. You know how I love doing this, and I hope that some of the words I've said here today stick with you. And if you forget my name or if you forget anything we talked about, the one thing I do want you to remember is just learn. You can't ever learn enough. Be inquisitive, ask questions. Try to be like that 3-year-old or 5-year-old that just asked the question, why? Why? Why, daddy? Why, mommy? Why, auntie? Why? Just keep that question going as long as you can in your life and in your career, and keep learning, and you'll be doing just fine.
Yeah, Pat, I was laughing quite about. I put myself on mute and turned the camera off because I was having some fun listening to you. So, I love the award that they gave you, because I can totally relate to that. And also the fact that, you know, what skill you use the most today when you're not coding. And I think I shared this with a few of the students, how I have to, you know, I had to dig into some code recently. Not that I wrote the code, but I had to troubleshoot it and fix it. And I still know how to do that. Even though I don't write code on a regular basis, I can dig apart anybody's code and figure out what's wrong. Because I've done that for so many years and so many hours of digging through lines and lines of code that when there's a problem, I can look at it and figure it out. So agree with that philosophy. And I think that's what we're trying to show you guys, is that, you know, you may not be a front-end, back-end web developer, but everything we're teaching you will help you take on any job, and it'll let you be able to really bring these metacognitive skills to successful careers in the end. And troubleshooting and problem solving and debugging is the most valuable skill you'll ever learn. Yeah. So Pat, thanks for reiterating that and to sharing your experiences, and loved. I enjoyed the hearing everything and what you shared with them. I think it was some really valuable advice and insight, and we look forward to having you on future guest speaking spots for our cohort, and maybe we'll even bring you back for a SharePoint introduction.
Love that. Thank you, and thanks everybody.
Okay, have a great day. And I do plan on putting some posts out there on LinkedIn to kind of thank you for your time, and sending a little recommendation over to your LinkedIn profiles. So thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you very
Pat.
much.
Hey, Pat.
Thank you, Pat
Thanks, Pat.
Esposito.